AskReddit by deleted. What screams I was emotional abused as a child. Noticing every little behavioral change or any change in the pitch of somebody's voice. I also feel a constant sense of walking on eggshells around everybody. This too. Being all things to everyone. Chameleon syndrome. Because adapting to sudden mood changes and being liked was necessary for survival. Not being able to have boundaries. Not being able to accept help. Anticipating why people are mad at you even when they haven't communicated they're mad. I sometimes become convinced that someone is mad at me even if I haven't spoken to them or all of our interactions have been benign. I like to sit and pick apart every interaction and conversation to try and figure out where I could have gone wrong. Such a fun hobby. Being afraid to speak up about your interests out of fear of the other person judging and making fun of said interest as they don't like the same thing. My dad did this to me since I was 3. And he now wonders why I don't tell him anything. I have the exact same problem with my father. Hyper-independency. You have to become everything for yourself when you don't have someone to lean on. I read this somewhere recently and it hit me so hard. All the times I thought I was learning to be independent, I was actually just learning to live without something I needed. Edit. You're all doing so great. Not being able to tell how you feel or what you want because you learned that these things don't matter. This one for sure. Before I went no contact, I remember one time when my mom was once again telling me what a great mother she was, and she said, "We might not have had much, but you girls wanted for nothing." In a rare moment of assertiveness, I said, "What?" "We did without so many important things." Her entire rationale was that I didn't ask for anything. Well, by the age of 7, I had learned that the answer was always no, so I stopped asking. Then you grow up, and people are like, you have to ask for what you want in relationships for years. I was like, there is no possible way that works. Turns out it works just fine when the person you're asking considers you to also be a person. Apologizing at every little thing when they didn't even do anything wrong. Becoming distant or suddenly quiet and retreating around certain topics or when someone raises their voice. Overall having a long history from a young age of low self-esteem or self-worth, and not wanting to do specific and super minor things, or inversely, not wanting to forget about small minor things that aren't that big of a deal for fear of getting yelled at. Just a few that can be very obvious signs to me since I myself have a few of these same issues. Hey I don't like how many of these things I do. Also, never expressing any emotion ever because as a child they got screamed at, shut down for it right away, resulting in them not being able to feel or express emotions in a healthy way later in life. I've been praised at work for my ability to stay calm in all situations. Little did they know that I've lost the ability to express emotion normally in chaotic situations. It's a weird superpower that backfires in normal day-to-day situations and I am constantly having to remind myself how I am supposed to react to things, like when a coworker is upset or has happy news. Hypervigilance. The elevated state of constantly assessing potential threats around you is often the result of a trauma. People who have been in combat, have survived abuse, or have post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, can exhibit hypervigilance. Edit. My first gold. Thank you so much. Also, if anyone is looking for guidance on healing PTSD from abuse, I highly recommend Pete Walker's book Complex PTSD, From Serving to Thriving. One of the more minor and annoying side effects of this is hearing shit nobody else hears. Like my neighbors play music at a very reasonable volume and I can hear it so clearly, but my partner who is right next to me is baffled. It's because I'm always listening for sounds, man. If you listened really hard you'll hear it too. Incredibly anxious. Perfectionists. My therapist finally understood where I was coming from with this. I was terrified of being physically hurt by my professor because my work wasn't good enough. And she asked me, but what if your work is good enough? What if you could accept that your work is good enough? And I immediately replied, it doesn't matter what I think of my own work. His opinion is what determines whether I'm going to be in danger, and I saw it click in her mind where my problems come from. 0 self-esteem. Your mind bullies you, insults you, you're paranoid of what people think about you, you're afraid to form relationships, friends or life partners, you have a hard time trusting people, you walk silently, you speak quietly, you automatically assume the worst in any situation, you can't stand up for yourself, you're socially awkward, you're never happy or content, you say yes to everything even if you don't want to do it, you agree with the bad things people say about you, you compare yourself to others then tell yourself you're worse, stupid, ugly, etc. compared to them. I am there now. I get anxiety every once in a while and I shut down and pull away from people until it blows over. They don't seem to be able to regulate strong emotions. They're quick to check any excitement they might feel with some downer thought about how good things never last. They are unable to validate their own decisions and usually need to check with someone else to see if something is worth doing. Strong paralyzing indecision for fear of making a wrong choice and getting punished. Deleted. Hypervigilance. I always thought I was just really good at reading people. Until I realized it was because I'm scanning for danger and making sure I know if anyone is mad at me. Oof. Reminds me of a post that nailed me to a wall in high school. Something like, you're not an empath, you grew up in an unstable household. It's not a quirk, it's a survival trait. Assuming every person who's acting like they care about them will eventually betray them. And X200B. Wow, thanks for the awards. Obligatory IWAS and XPACT hat lol. I hope everyone reading this is actively looking for help trying to become someone they can trust. I wish you all the best. My abusive dad's ex-girlfriend hated my mom and acted like a second mom to me for years and buttered me up. Then the literal day I turned 18 she had me write a false report about my mom being a bad mom towards my little sister. That could have gotten her removed from the home. I realized the day after that I had made a mistake and that I was manipulated for years and that she didn't actually love me. Both of my actual parents are abusive in their own ways, but damn, it hurt coming from someone who I thought was on my side. Can't take compliments. Deflects positive comments. Taking compliments is fucking hard. Especially when it's in a group setting. Awkward smile all the way. And I was not abused. Self-critical perfectionism and the idea that if you aren't good at everything then what good are you for? Ouch. This one kicked me right in the shin. Extreme empathy. I used to think it was a superpower in a sense, but in reality it was because I grew up in a chaotic, sometimes violent household and learned to read the room really well for survival. I'm 31 still trying to break people-pleasing behavior. My mother was a hardcore alcoholic. She died when I was 14, and when I got home from school she was always passed out. She'd usually wake up around sunset, and to this day I still get skittish around sunset. I never knew what I was going to get when she woke up, so I learned to read her mood in an instant and become whatever she wanted me to be. I can do that now as an adult, and, well, now I'm at the point where I'm like, fuck it, I am who I am and if you don't like it you can fuck right off. It took me till 50 to get to that point. But I won't say that skill hasn't served me well. I can read people in an instant. Buying a gift for yourself feels like breaking a tacit rule. But for me it's basic necessities, not gifts for myself. Catching yourself giving out too much personal information and actively talking less afterwards. For me, it's like, holy fuck, someone is actually listening to me? And they care, so I end up spilling my life story and deepest secrets. Then realize I just went overboard, so I overcorrect by quickly clamming up. Ninja steps. People are constantly commenting about how you are sneaking up on them when you feel you're just walking normally. I've noticed this too. It's a dead giveaway. I can tell my so is well adjusted because he clops through the house like a fucking horse. Self-sabotage, emotional distance, difficulty connecting. Maintaining emotional distance and having difficulty connecting have been some of the most painful themes in my life. I have a deep inner sense of feeling unimportant due to emotional neglect, and it has led to a constant feeling of loneliness, emptiness. When you read this comment section and go OFK, why is everything relatable? I read through the whole thread and was on several occasions like, oh yeah, I do that. Was I abused? Then I remembered that I had a happy carefree childhood and that I'm probably just really stupid. Being quiet and struggling to make routine decisions like when asked which restaurant they prefer. Trying to hide things from the view of others. My family used to always hover over everything I did and then told me how stupid it is and laughed at me for doing it. Now when someone walks into my room, I will immediately stop whatever I'm doing. I'll be watching a video about cars and click the X button at the speed of light if someone comes in because I have an irrational fear they'll just laugh at all my interests. It always ends up looking like I'm turning off porn or something. Saying sorry all the time, and then when someone tells you to stop saying sorry for saying sorry. Loved saying sorry again to people when I worked in retail and they told me to say it less. Also smiling and laughing while anxious or in bad situations. Never saying no to other people. That one hit hard. Flinching when someone goes to touch you. Along those lines, not knowing how to feel when someone hugs you, and you end it quickly. Feeling like something is wrong or something bad is going to happen when you are happy. Whenever I realize I'm having a good time, I immediately shut down and become very withdrawn. I can never live in the moment. It took me a long time to get out of that mindset. That feeling of I'm happy. Too happy. What's waiting around the corner that will ruin this? It may just be a function of hypervigilance. But if I walk through your house, yard, neighborhood, I'll basically get an inventory of everything in the area and 4 buildings, a floor plan, location of windows, vents, outlets, slight imperfections, bits of debris on the floor. I notice everything. If you're looking for something in your house, just ask me when I'm there. I either already know where it is because I've seen it, or I can make a couple of guesses where the item could fit. I've had multiple people tell me it's a bit weird that I can find things in their house just from walking through. Saying sorry 24/7 for things that don't even need to be apologized for. Living off of nerves 24/7, constantly being in fight or flight mode. Analyzing everything that you say before you say it to make sure that it's what the other person wants to hear, and to make sure that they're not going to get mad at you for no reason. Low self-esteem. Going into instant panic mode when someone shouts or raises their voice, even if they're not shouting or raising their voice at you. Never saying no to prevent backlash. Always believing that you're the problem even when you're not. Being a loner, having no friends. Not talking to anyone because everything you say is criticized and judged. Being a people pleaser. For starters. Being seen as the good kid. Or being told you are very mature for your age. Hyper-independence. Having to be 100% responsible for myself at a young age instilled in me this idea that I am not allowed to go to anyone for help, or discuss things before I make decisions. My parents didn't want to take care of me and they actively ignored problems I was having so they didn't have to deal with it. As an adult, telling someone I need help or that I'm having a difficult time with something feels like I am laying my neck on a railway track. The constant need to justify every action you take to everyone around you that is taking a small amount of time to yourself has to be justified by explaining how much you've had going on that day, week, instead of just taking the time like a normal person. It's taken years to try and get to the point I don't need to explain every little thing I do. Telling people what you think is a funny family story, only to have them react with absolute horror. I used to casually mention that I almost killed my grandfather once with a knife and I never realized how bad that actually is. Or the story of how during the '94 earthquake, my mom had a 5-year-old me walk ahead of her in complete darkness and I saw a shard of glass on the floor and let her step on it. Working like a machine because even if you do 110% of the things you don't feel like it's enough. Hypervigilant and apologizing all the time. I have two tendencies. I either emotionally shut down, I don't cry, I don't smile, I don't react, when faced with a problem, or when upset I cry profusely, not because I am saddened but rather because I cannot legally break your neck without not going to jail and that infuriates me. Always thinking about how much trouble you are going to be in. I flipped a leather belt once while a friend was in the room, the thing where you layer the belt and then smack the two lines together to make a whipping sound. He jumped really hard and almost fell out of his chair in terror. He yelled at me to never do that again and left shortly after. We never talked about it. That sounds more like physically abused. Constantly asking, are you mad at me, when someone gets quiet all of a sudden. I have been working on it over the years, but yes, this is something I do often even decades later. When my mom went silent, she was about to go nuclear. As bad as it sounds, it was usually better if she lashed out right away. If she went quiet, then we knew we were in for something really painful or humiliating. Extremely protective of younger people. An obsession with making really young children feel like the most important person in the room. An inability to disengage from an argument until the other person does. Deleted. Impulsively putting earnest effort into delicately closing doors to minimize sound. Yeah, this one right here. It falls in line with walking on eggshells. The best way to avoid being targeted is not to be noticed. If they're a musician, they won't practice if anybody else is in the room. I have to go elsewhere to practice any instruments because I can't stand being watched before I'm performance ready. I was criticized way too much for not being perfect from the outset. Constantly apologizing for, basically just existing around other people. From my professional experience. 1. The absolute need of controlling and knowing everything. Who is where doing what? When will they be back? 2. Trying a tiny bit too desperate to make everyone like you, trying to guess what they want from you, copying a person's behavior. 3. Lack of self-awareness. Like inability to actually retail about themselves, deal with themselves, their emotions, their needs. Jesus, do I even have a personality, or am I just trauma responses? I reject clicking on this threat. I realized actually how much I have been, and still am, abused, and I can't do anything about it. I'm scared for life and no one wants or can help. Being so afraid of being alone, you not only allow others to use you, you'll even enable it if you still don't think it's good enough for them. Deleted. Bending over backwards to make people happy at the expense of your own happiness, especially that of the abuser if they're still present in your life. Believing you are a burden to everyone as you were probably told you were, although not in so many words. Not knowing what to do with big, uncomfortable feelings because you were never taught. Avoiding all humans because dealing with them is just straight up exhausting.